And just as a reminder to everyone, we are recording this, so you can have it for later and also share it with anyone in your network, on your teams that you think could benefit from the content. All right, so it's about 8:31. As we get started at 8:32, just to allow time for people to join, who might be searching for the Zoom link.
Share with everybody that when we did this, for Sarah, we did this with Skanska in 2008. We worked together as partners, landlord, tenant.
It's a good reminder for everyone who
Yes.
isn't presenting to Zoom. Mute themselves.
Yeah, that is a reminder. This is a Zoom meeting, which was by design versus a webinar. So if you could all be mindful of muting, that would be great, except when you're speaking, of course. All right, so 8:32, let's go ahead and kick it off. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lisa Ames, and I'm an operating exec at Norwest Venture Partners. I'm also the interim CMO for the firm, which is a new development that I'm really excited about. And these events we've been doing for a while, and I started them last May. And I think what's fun about how this event came about is Udi joined that event in May, and he started riffing on some really cool brand stuff that the audience was super excited about. And at one point, I actually considered dropping the mic and just handing it over to Udi to talk about all the great work he's done in brand there. But we went ahead and followed on with our topic, which was how to build the confidence of your board. And so catch the replay of that on our website and the blog if you missed it. But instead of dropping the mic that day, I decided to wait and invite Udi to be a speaker at a future event. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. So as you can see here, our topic, building an iconic B2B brand. And we're going to talk about Gong. We're going to talk about all the great work that Udi has done in that role. And so by way of introduction to Udi, he probably doesn't need much introduction, but he's the CMO of Gong. I think, Udi, you've been in that role for about 5 years now, coming up on your anniversary. He's a brand and category builder extraordinaire, thought leader, a speaker, a father of 3, including a set of twins, and a musician. Udi, how's that new baby grand treating you?
Oh, I can't wait to get a tune that just got here a few days ago, but already excited about it.
Yeah, so check him out on LinkedIn. He plays for the audience, which you can enjoy. So we're thrilled to be here. This is going to be a nice long 1.5 hour session. We welcome you for any or all of that. And we really want to keep this interactive. We want it to be a community event and discussion. So invite you to come on camera, ask questions either through the chat or just blurt them out and share your thoughts and your insights with the audience and ask your questions of Udi. Okay. So as we've already established, we're recording this for you to share later. Ask you to stay on mute while you're not speaking. And I think one of the ideas here is that we want to build this community. We want to allow you guys to not only gather to get the education and insights that you came for, but for you to interact with each other and build connections that will endure beyond today's event. And I'm also happy to make introductions across the portfolio for folks that want to connect and engage. So with that, I'm going to stop the share here. Actually, I think maybe Katrina, you already did that for me, and ask you to go ahead and take it away, Udi.
Good morning, everyone. All right, I'm so excited to be here. What I thought we'd do today is I'd start with a few points that I usually get asked about, so get those out of the way. And good afternoon, Europe. Thank you. And then we'll keep most of the time for your questions, which I find are the more interesting part, because there's only so much you can hear me ramble. So just quick rules of the game. If you're not asking a question, please mute yourself. Otherwise, we get a lot of noise in the room. And once we do get to the Q&A, a great way to do that is just to unmute yourself. I find it difficult to follow the chat while I'm trying to engage with you. So a great way is to unmute or type something in the chat, and Lisa or Kristen will look it up for us and ask a question. All right. So assuming most of you know a little bit about Gong. If not, I can add more about that. I'll start with some of the principles that have really guided us in building this brand that have worked for us. To quote Elad Gil, a great entrepreneur himself and author of a great book, he said that the only good generic startup advice is that there is no good generic startup advice, and you've got to keep that in mind. Oh, I'm not muted there. So there really is no generic startup advice, and the reason I mention that is that what I'm about to describe to you today has worked for us at Gong. It will not necessarily work for any other company. So you've got to take everything with a grain of salt and sort of pick from the toolbox and principles that I'll present today what might work for you. So that was a disclaimer I love giving. Okay, let's start with the basics. I've only got 5 points I want to cover, so it should take us about 15 minutes, maybe a tiny bit more, and then we'll go to your questions. So the first one, which is almost a cliche by now, but still so many startups get this wrong, is speak to humans like B2C companies do, right? If you open a magazine or your TV or see a billboard from a company like Coca-Cola or Adidas or Lego, they're actually acknowledging that you're a human being, that you're busy, that you have a sense of humor, that you have a very short attention span, and they talk to you in a way that recognizes that. Yet, if I scroll my LinkedIn feed, I look at most B2B brands, they assume I have all the time in the day to read their 40-page white paper. And I'm wondering, like, why did they create that? The only ones who read that are their competitors. That's the reality. And if that's still most of what your content looks like, then you're not doing it right. And so that's one thing. And we'll talk about the packaging and how to make the content easily consumable a little bit later. But let's start with acknowledging that John, who is the VP of Sales at Acme, is the same John that on his commute to work listens to short podcasts, browses his LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever the kids are doing these days, and does not have time for a 40-page white paper on most days. There are a few exceptions. If you're selling to IT and they need something to file as, oh, this is a serious vendor, then go ahead and create that 40-page white paper, but don't expect to use that for lead gen. It just doesn't work. Now, to zoom in, when I say talk to people like B2C brands do, look at your tone of voice, and talk about the brand tone of voice, right? So many B2B brands, I find, confuse being an authority in their space, which is important, right? I'm sure everyone in this room wants their brand to be an authority in your space, but so many B2B brands confuse being an authority with being boring. Okay, not the same thing, not the same thing. You don't have to be stuffy. You don't have to sound like, I won't mention any company names, you don't have to sound like a big corporation salesperson sweating in a suit and tie. You can be a human being. Imagine that you're meeting John, the procurement guy at a bar, and just talk to him like you would talk to him at a bar. Forget all the salutations and all the formalities and the long table of contents and 3 pages of disclaimers. Just get to the point. Talk to him as if you were talking to a friend. And that goes for every piece of content we create, right? If you're not on Gong's email list, shame on you, but it's not too late. You can do this while I'm talking. Just go to our blog or website and sign up. You'll see that our emails talk to you like a human being. People actually take our emails and screenshot them and put them on Twitter and LinkedIn and other places because they're absolutely delighted by them. They brighten up their day because someone actually talked to them like a human being. So if you're not doing that, you should do that on email, in social, in direct mails, in webinars like this, in your white papers, if you have to create them. Just talk like a human being. And that means acknowledging that John is still the same John with that sense of humor and that need for distraction in the middle of his day. We'll talk about social media maybe a little bit later in more detail. But that's such a huge principle. And I'll end this point on talking to your buyers as if they were consumers with one very easy test that we put all of our content through. If you would not want to consume that piece of content, why do you expect someone else to? Now, just be brutally honest with yourself. Your team or you created a piece of content. Would you want to consume it? Would it add value to your day? And value can be educating, it can be entertaining, it can be distracting, it can be just a funny meme. But if it does not add value to your day, if it's in your face product pitch that nobody asked for, why do you expect someone else to consume this and enjoy it? So just be brutally honest about that test. And once you get through that stage, the ultimate stage of content value that I put my team accountable for, I hold my team accountable for, is content so good that people are willing to pay for it. Okay? Not just agreeing to be subjected to your content, but so good that they would pay for it. Now, you must be saying, Udi, that's a ridiculous bar. Like, who creates B2B content that people are willing to pay for? Well, I'll tell you what, every couple of months we get an email. It can be from an assistant professor in University of Illinois. It can be from head of enablement at a large enterprise. And she will ask us, hey folks, I just downloaded this amazing cheat sheet you created. I want to use this for my college course. What would it cost me to license this from you? We get those emails, not once, not twice a year. We get them several times and we share them across the team and we go, woohoo, this is the bar that we set. Content's so good that people want to actually pay for it. And of course, at that point, we respond and say, all you need to do is credit gone. Feel free to use this any way you want. We are not trying to create money from our content. We're trying to educate and entertain and help people by providing them with value. And we're so glad you found so much value that you're actually inquiring about paying for it, but it is in fact free. Our content department is not a revenue maker in that sense. So that is my first point that I want to make on how we talk to consumers. And I promise I'm going to get to the next point, is how to create that valuable content. Lisa, it looks like you wanted to add a follow-up question.
I did. You just made me think of something, Udi. We talk a lot about, like you said, getting valuable content out there. And then how do you expand the audience? I mean, what's your view on gating versus not gating? Because if we do the math, right, you think about, well, if you gate it, it's going to be 1%, if you're lucky, that fill out the form, and then a smaller percentage from there that actually consume the content.
I love that question. And I'm happy to jump to answer that because I think it's interesting, and then I'll get back to my scheduled programming. So here's something, I was just talking to one of my team members yesterday, and I told him, he manages our social media, and I told him, Vince, we need to do a webinar just about how we manage our social media, because so many of the things that are obvious to us are absolutely novelties to other companies. And one of them has to do with the gated versus public. The short answer is we use both, but we do it in a very, very deliberate way. Here's probably one of our best kept secrets that is not really a secret, just I don't know why more companies don't do this. So when people ask us, your social content is great and it's full of all this really fun stuff that people love consuming and they love sharing and it goes viral, but how do you even measure the success or value of that? Because it's all public, right? Anyone can go on LinkedIn, browse your content. I don't get any information on who those people are. You only see, 20,000 people viewed your post. I don't know who they are. They didn't visit my website. I can't convert them. Why do you do this? How do you measure it? Here's the thing. Almost every week we publish an article. It's usually by one of our team members like Devin Reed from the content team. And he'll publish, and I'll talk about the actual content in a few minutes. He'll publish a Gong Labs post that is maybe a 1,200 word article on how to use video like we're doing now for better sales meeting, okay? And it's open to the public. Anyone can read it, just like Lisa said. In that case, we're optimizing for eyeballs. Now, here's where it gets clever. Every single article we've ever published, if you go into it, you will see that about 1/3 of the way down, and then again at the very bottom, we put a call to action to a premium piece of content that is directly related to the public article that you are reading. So if the article is about 5 tips for having better sales calls on Zoom, the link to the download will be get the cheat sheet with all 10 tips for having amazing sales calls on Zoom. Now, if I already lured you into that public article, that means you're interested in having better sales calls on Zoom, right? When you're in there and you see that call to action, download the printable cheat sheet for all 10 tips for Zoom calls, I've got you. And when people click that, we see conversion rates of up to 72% on those landing pages. People don't even stop to read them. They're just like, I want this PDF now. Where do I put my email in? And that's how we convert the anonymous public readers into known contacts on our website. And that is how I transfer the traffic from where you originally go, which is LinkedIn. In our case, our buyers are sales leaders that are on LinkedIn. That's how I drag them to my website, by giving them the bait, the public article on LinkedIn, and then including a very clear call to action to something that I know you will want if you've already chosen to read that public article. And that's how I convert you with gated content on the website. So last Wednesday, I think Wednesday or Thursday, we published the latest Gong Labs post. I think it was about 7 tips for the perfect cold email. And we had a cheat sheet with like even more tips. We got a 72% conversion rate on that landing page, and I think about 3,500 downloads in the first 2 hours that article was up in the air. That's how we convert the public readers from social to actual known contacts on the website. I hope that answered your question, Lisa.
Love it. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, that's a free tip. That's one of our most successful lead gen ways. And you know what's the beautiful thing about it? It costs $0. I didn't say paid advertising. I didn't say anything that cost you money. Create great content, put it out there, and convert the people on your website by giving them a follow-on to that same content. So it's all one holistic campaign that starts with a public article and then the premium download. That's how we do it. And that's why our organic social has been one of our top 3 acquisition channels. And the beautiful thing is that it's free. By the way, a second channel from our top 3 is also free, and that is our email list. So once we get your email by downloading that first piece of content, we now know where you live, and we can email you content every week, and every so often, even a sales offer. That's also a free channel, our email. So 2 out of 3 are free. The third, if you're wondering, is our events. Events do cost some money to produce, unfortunately. But we'll get to that if you want later. Okay, so I talked about point number 1, talking to your audience as if they were human beings, like consumer companies do. Let's talk about number 2, which is our formula for creating content that is absolutely mouth-watering, that people cannot resist to download. Okay, there's only 3 things you need to remember about it, and they're easier said than done. But if you've ever downloaded a piece of content, it probably tick these 3 boxes. Here are the 3 things we absolutely ensure every piece of content includes. 1, it is highly relevant and specific to your audience. I'll run through the 3 and then I'll dive into each one to explain how we do them. 1, it has to be relevant and highly specific to your audience. 2, it has to be interesting and add value to their day. And 3, it has to be very easy to consume. That's it. That's the tweet. Okay, 3 things to make award-winning content that people actually want to consume: relevant, interesting, and easy to consume. Here's how it looks in reality. The relevant part, I'm sure you've seen this. You know, if you're a CMO and you're scrolling your LinkedIn feed, what are you more likely to click on? Something that says 7 budget planning tips for 2022, or 7 budget planning tips every CMO needs to know. You're more likely to click the second one because you're like, oh, I'm a CMO. This is highly relevant and specific to me. That trick works every single time. And I did a pretty expensive experiment a few months ago to demonstrate that works not only on your LinkedIn feed or in an email subject line, right? Consider the last email you opened, it probably had something very relevant and personal to you in the subject line that made you open it if you didn't know the sender. I did an experiment on national television, and I did a Super Bowl commercial where I wanted to ensure that all the VPs of sales in the audience do not go to the bathroom during the break where my commercial was on. And so the first 5 seconds out of that 30-second, very expensive commercial break, the first 5 seconds are zooming into a nameplate on a desk in an empty office that says VP of Sales. Because I was thinking, if that works on LinkedIn and works on email, why wouldn't it work on your TV screen? And it worked, and people tuned in. Okay, so telling your audience, this is for you, Miss CMO, or this is for you, Mr. CFO, that is so important. And one way of doing that is just including the title. Okay, there are other ways, but that's the very most obvious way. So that's how you ensure it's relevant. Two, it's got to be interesting and add value to their day. Here's a couple of examples of what I mean by that. You as your company, you have your agenda of what you're trying to get out there. But if you start from that, you will probably get it wrong at least as many times as you get it right. A much better way to get your content right is to always start from your audience side. What are they thinking about today, right now? And how can that meet something that I have to say to them? So here's an example. When the pandemic started last year, remember the good old days? When the pandemic started, we noticed that our salespeople, even in our commercial segment, selling to relatively small companies, were now being asked to justify the purchase of Gong through their CFOs. And we never had to go through a CFO for a 20K deal. We're used to doing that for a 200K deal or $1 million deal, but for a 20K deal. And we noticed in Gong calls that was coming up more often, that our buyers were saying, hey, I need to run this by the CFO. I'm sorry, it's going to take a little bit longer. And it took us about 3 days to realize that what was happening is that CFOs everywhere were clutching onto their wallets and telling the organization we're only making crucial purchases right now because the company and the economy and the world is going to this uncertain state. And so we thought, well, if our salespeople are experiencing this, salespeople everywhere must be experiencing this. Our sales team took about our marketing team took about 48 hours to create a piece of content called the CFO cheat sheet, how to get past your buyer CFO. And they put it out there. And within about 72 hours, that became one of the 3 most downloaded content assets we've ever put out. You can go Google it, you'll find it. It's a really simple piece of content, but that is exactly what our audience was thinking about that week. It was early April of 2020, when all the CFOs were in this state of chaos, like we're not buying anything, everything goes through me, even the tiniest purchase. We put out this cheat sheet to help salespeople everywhere get past their buyer CFO, and everybody wanted to download it. And that's an example of how you open your eyes and ears to what your audience is concerned about today, and you give them content that helps them. That's how you add value to their day. And of course, it was sponsored by Gong, and there were links to other Gong material, etc. But it was first and foremost about what the audience wanted to hear about, not what we wanted to say. And so that's a great way to stay interesting and really add value to their day. The third component of great content pieces, remember we talked number 1, highly relevant and specific, 2, interesting and add value, and 3 is make it easily consumable. So I've already given you a spoiler to what that means. It probably does not mean creating a 40-page white paper. I think in the last 5 years I've been at Gong, we've created 1 or 2 assets that were longer than 10 pages. One of them was a Forrester TI paper, and I think there was another one about security or something. But you've got to know, like, your buyer, who's going to read that white paper. If you're selling to millennials, they're not going to read a 20-page paper. They've never in their life read a 20-page paper. But if yours is not going to be the first. If depending on your buyer, you might find that a cartoon series like we recently launched is a great way to communicate with them. Maybe memes or broetry or whatever they consume and where they consume it, that's how you want to reach them. To make it easily consumable, we assume that people are letting us into their day in an unsolicited way, right? They're mindlessly scrolling through their social feed, maybe on their lunch break or between calls. They don't have time to go through a long registration process or a long reading process. So if you post a video, it's got to be under 2 minutes. If we put a link to podcast, we make it easy for people to consume it on their commute to work if they're still commuting, or in the gym or wherever they do it. We keep episodes short. We post a lot of memes and other sales related materials that literally take 10 seconds to consume, and that's what brings people back. And once you make enough of those that are easy to consume, you buy people's attention and trust to download something that might take them a little bit longer. Maybe they will sign up for that 45-minute webinar after they've consumed 10 easy charts where you gave them a quick tip. Like when you're talking to a C-level exec, here's the number of questions you should be asking, and here's how it affects your win rates. And it takes less than 10 seconds to consume that because it's on a single chart. If you post those 3 times a week, once you actually want to do a 45-minute webinar on it, people already got so much value from you that they will tune in. I'll give you an example from an hour ago. One of our sales reps, she tagged me on a Gong call this morning because she cold called a prospect, and the prospect told her as soon as he heard this is Elizabeth calling from Gong, he said, if you were calling from any other company other than Gong, I would not be taking this call. But I'm repeating his words now. He said, you've already provided me so much value with your content that I'm compelled to take this call. Those were his exact words. So if you do that and keep pushing out the content and thinking of how much value you're delivering, your sales team is going to pick those fruit later when the customers actually take your cold calls. So to summarize the second point, the 3 pillars or components of mouth-watering content are: it's highly relevant and specific to your audience; 2, it's interesting and adds value to their day; and 3, it's super easy to consume. I'll pause here if there are follow-up questions on that.
You can put them in the chat, guys, or if you're not shy, just share with the audience your question, and we can turn this into a discussion.
As always, Lisa, I underestimated how long I can talk about each topic. We're only at number 2 and already about 30 minutes in.
I have a quick question. This is great information. Thank you. I'm curious about community engagement and the format specifically. So you mentioned social. What have you seen be successful regarding community engagement and building a community on social, especially LinkedIn? Do you use LinkedIn groups? Do you use like private groups? Is it mainly publishing on the company page? What are the different formats of building that community on LinkedIn?
Great question. So we've tried almost everything on LinkedIn, including groups in the very, very early days. We never picked up meaningful engagement there. I'm talking about 5 years ago, and I'm sure they've done some work on the product, but I also think it's somewhat been neglected. So I'm not an active member of any LinkedIn group, and I don't expect my audience to be. If they're an executive like me, they're too busy to go searching through questions and see what's new. So no, we use LinkedIn Live to bring people together to a live event like this. So we found that scheduling that on a regular day and time makes it easier for people to plan their day and week and know when to expect to tune in. And then it's also available on demand. But more specifically, we've recently launched a dedicated community, and that's an effort that is owned by our customer success team. Nisha is our community manager on that team, in partnership with our marketing team to give it the Gong pizzazz. And we built it on a dedicated platform. We looked at all the different options. We were thinking of launching it on Slack, like many communities in the last couple of years have been launched, but there's a lot of drawbacks to doing that. Yes, it's very easy to set up, but it was never really meant to be a community. And that means that the user experience is not ideal. So we picked one of the dedicated systems. There are a few out there. I'm happy to follow up and give more specific information if you want. And we're still in the, I'd say, late beta rollout stage of that. So we announced the launch of the community at our last event, Celebrate, and we had a lot of interest of people who want to join. And we're now expanding that to all customers, and at the next stage to non-customers as well, to make it a revenue champions community. I will say that one interesting phase that we had in launching that was thinking really hard and deep about who are the people most likely to join that community and be active members. And just to sort of walk you through some of our thought process, we sell mainly to sales leaders, to the VP sales or the CRO, but we quickly realized that those people are so busy. I mean, they hardly find time to respond to their emails. There's 0% chance of them finding the time to walk into a community in the middle of their day and browse what other people are talking about and asking questions and participate. It's just not going to happen. And then we looked at other companies who have really successful communities like Salesforce, and we looked for the common threads. Who are the people engaged? And we found that in Salesforce, it's mostly the admins. The technical people, that's their thing. That's how they look for answers to common questions when they're trying to configure something and they can't figure it out. They go to the community. And when they figure it out and they have a clever hack, they want to show it off and share value with others. So they go and put that in the community. So we're like, okay, admins seem like a really good audience. because they like these online communities, and that's where they share information and consume information. So that's one persona that we started with. And the other one is the frontline managers. And again, this is kind of specific to Gong, but just to share what the thought process that we did was, we knew that the individual contributors like salespeople and SDRs, they perhaps have the time for the community, but that would provide little value to Gong in terms of they would never be able to buy or even heavily influence the purchase of Gong. So going a level higher, we've got the admins and we've got the frontline managers that we believe are in the right balance area of they have value as influencers on the decision to purchase Gong. And they're also the kind of people that would probably hang out in an online community. So again, not the ideal persona that we're after the CRO, but you've got to be very realistic with the expectations that you're setting so you don't set yourself up for disappointment. I hope I answered your question, Veronica.
Hey, Udi, one thing I think might be useful to level set on, given that we've invited not only marketers to this event, but also founders and CEOs who may still be, maybe still learning the language of marketing. And so, for those people in the audience who may still equate brand with like visual identity, tone of voice, which of course are important brand elements, what would you say to them in terms of advice about, how to shift their mindset to think bigger? And maybe a better way to ask that question is, what's the definition of brand in 2022?
Yeah, I love that question, Lisa. I think it was Simon Sinek, but I could be misattributing the quote, that said that brand is way too important to leave it to marketing. Brand is way too important to leave it to marketing. And I'm saying that as a marketer. So I take no offense because that's absolutely true. If a CEO or a co-founder is expecting marketing to go build our brand, it's going to fail, full stop. It is going to fail. A brand is what the company is and what the company does. And marketing is the steward responsible for putting makeup on that brand, for the tone of voice, for the visual identity, for making consistency across your events and social and content, and does a lot of great things that people talk about and sometimes misconstrue as being the brand. But the brand is what you are as a company. It's what you are. At Gong, I think our 8 operating principles really embody who we are as a company. It's not our purple and pink logo. That's just, I'm happy to talk about that.
That's a piece of it, an element.
It is an element because it's different and it's bold and it's a little cheeky, and that is part of who we are. But that's just the very tip of the iceberg. That's the visual representation of who we are. Marketing can't build your brand. Don't even ask them to do that. It's insulting. They can't build your brand. Okay, think about your brand as a personality. Can you ask a makeup artist or a hairstylist or a fashion designer to build your brand? No, you can ask them to accentuate certain parts that you like more and maybe mask some that you like less, but that's the outer shell. The brand is who you are. One definition I like of brand, and it goes for people and companies as well, it's what people say about you once you leave the room. That is your brand. It's what people say about you once you leave the room. Now, what do you want that to be? So start by doing all the things that you want people to talk about. If you want to be known as helpful, then when you're in the room, actually help people all the time. So when you leave the room, they'll say, wow, Mahesh is so helpful, isn't he? If that's what you want them to say, you've got to be helpful. You can't just ask marketing, portray us as a helpful brand, but not do anything about it. If you want to be known for standing up for diversity and inclusion, do that, and then ask marketing to amplify some of the great stories and the campaigns that you're running. But don't leave it to marketing to portray you as a company promoting diversity if you don't actually do it. And it goes for every single thing. You want to be bold, you want to be edgy, you actually have to be that. You can't leave it to marketing.
Udi, I have a question.
I love that. I want to quote that. Don't leave your brand to marketing. I got to find out who's
the marketer. Yes.
So Udi, I had a question. You talk about highly relevant, interesting, easy to consume, and you talked about your one big expensive test.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on always doing A/B testing? Because as smart as you might be and as amazing as we might think we know our customers, we're always trying to find that interesting or easy to consume content. Tell me about how you find that.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 parts to the question. I think there's the macro and the micro. The macro is the content strategy, and I'm happy to spend a few minutes talking about that. And then the micro is the rapid testing. Maybe I'll get that out of the way first, because I don't know if that specifically was what you were asking about. We use a tool and service called Intellimize, which helps us test hundreds of options for personalizing web experiences and other elements of our digital footprint. I'll put it that way. You can look them up. They're great folks there, and there are other ways of rapidly testing creative for paid or your personal website experience or whatever you want to test. But I find that the biggest lifts in getting people to say download a piece of content is not what color you made the banner, or not if the button was on the left or on the right. It's if the content was relevant, interesting, and easy to consume. So you've got to get that right, and then you can do the fun optimization on that. I'll give, and now I'll talk maybe a couple of sentences on the strategy on the macro level. You know, when I came into the office at a small WeWork in Herzliya 5 years ago and sat with Amit Bendov, our CEO, we needed to figure out our content strategy. This was literally on day one in August 2016. And we said, okay, we're going to be selling to sales leaders. How can we add value to their day? And we looked on Amazon, and there are over 100,000 books on sales. So the last thing the world needs is more books on sales, more content, right? Wrong. And I think we've proven, if you're all here, it's probably because you've either consumed our content, or you follow us on social, or you listen to our podcast, or you get our emails. So clearly the world could have used more content on sales, but we needed to find and carve out our specific niche. And here's what we discovered. All of those great books on Amazon that you can get about sales, they were usually written by a guy or a gal who worked at Xerox or Salesforce and had a great experience and wrote a book about what happened to them. And the assumption is that that'll work for other companies, but it's based on opinions, and it's almost never based on data. It's almost never based on a reliable set of facts. And we went, oh, that was the aha moment. This is what the world needs. Even in our beta phase, we were recording thousands of customer calls, and we could actually analyze quite easily and see, oh, that is the optimal talk to listen ratio that a salesperson should be using if she wants to get a second call. And oh, this is the number of questions successful salespeople ask their prospects to get that next call. And all these insights start popping up once you ask the right questions. I'm like, nobody's ever written about this before. And if it sounds familiar to you now, it's because we've seen many copycats in the last 5 years trying to create similar content, but that did not exist 5 years ago. And so that's how we launched the Gong Labs series, with the goal of educating sales leaders and professionals everywhere about what actually works according to science or data or facts or whatever you want to call it. We now call it reality, what actually works in reality, and not what someone's opinion is. And so when we launch and we look for these controversial areas, one of the great examples was a couple of years ago, we wrote an article about why cursing at work can increase your win rates. And it's true. We have the data that shows that salespeople who use cursing, they use the S-bomb and the F word and whatever in a way that mirrors their prospect using them first. They see a 9% lift in win rates compared to their peers who keep it clean. How cool is that? Now, if I told you that as my opinion, you'd probably, say, Udi, you're crazy. But I showed the data, and fastcompany.com ran with the story. Radio stations were calling me to get me live on air to interview me about this. And this was groundbreaking to them. Like, we uncovered data that shows that in the workspace, there is a place and time for swearing and cursing, and this is how to use it correctly. And that was polarizing and controversial, and created thousands of comments on LinkedIn of people, going everything from this is like really good shit to people saying, oh, how could you ever recommend cursing? That's preposterous, and you people should be outlawed. And I love that, because if you're not polarizing, then you're not exciting either. If people don't have a strong opinion about what you just said, it's not interesting. So figuring out that strategy was the first step. And once we knew, okay, this is the angle, we haven't changed it in 5 years. We still publish almost like clockwork, every other week, a Gong Labs post uncovering reality insights of what actually works and doesn't work in sales. And people eat it up every week.
Love it. Udi, we're getting a lot of questions. Not only did we get these in advance, but in the chat here about the relationship between brand building and pipeline generation. And I think people often view it, and especially sometimes our CEOs and founders and CFOs, as an either or proposition. Well, do I invest in brand, or do I drive short-term, revenue or pipeline to lead to revenue? What's your view on that, and how to reframe the way you think about that either or proposition?
Sure. So as you might have heard me say in other forums, I think the question is wrong. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a must to do both. Now, if you ask me about a very specific stage in a company's life cycle with a very specific budget, what would I do first? I'll have answers, but the ballpark answer is you absolutely have to do both. And in the example I just gave 5 minutes ago of cold calling someone who said, I would slam down the phone if this were not Gong, because you've already given me so much value. That is the value of brand. That is the value of brand. So you absolutely have to do both. Now, what does that look like tactically? Well, at Gong, we have an understanding, my CFO, my CEO, and I, that about 80%, or I'll put it this way, at least 80% of the marketing spend and investment goes into things that are measurable. So we know how well we're doing, and that's what most people would categorize as demand gen, right? And then depending on your stage and budget, I would recommend anything between 10 to 20%, if you can get it, goes on brand building stuff that you don't even pretend that you'll know how to measure. Okay, when I do billboards, I don't pretend to know how to measure them. When I did the Super Bowl commercial, I did not expect to be able to measure it. When we emailed Dror from Norwest and a couple of other board members suggesting that we do a Super Bowl commercial, we set expectations. We said, we think this will have a long-term brand awareness effect that will put us in a new league of large companies that advertise on the world's largest sporting event. We don't expect any short-term impact. And that the responses we got from the board, I'm simplifying them, were basically, we usually don't favor these things for B2B brands because they're so impossible to measure and ridiculously expensive. But we know the folks at Gong are creative and you'll probably figure out something great. So good luck, go with it. And we went with it. And we were very, very pleasantly surprised, not only to get a lot of brand awareness, as we saw on LinkedIn and our salespeople reporting, getting hundreds of text messages from their customers saying, whoa, I just saw you on the Super Bowl, man, that was crazy. So we got all that cool stuff. We saw a bunch of candidates, like the career side almost crashed from number of applicants that came in, and it was all over the place. But more importantly, at least for the CFO and those looking at the numbers, within the 7 days following the Super Bowl, we broke all the company records of sales accepted inbound opportunities. So we actually saw an unexpected short-term impact on pipeline. And these days, I'm now approving the 2022 Super Bowl budget, which I'm going bigger next year. And I'm actually using revenue numbers to show them the clear ROI that brand investment made. Now, I don't like to say we got lucky, although luck had a little bit to do with it. We put a lot of very intentional work into the creative and the targeting, and I can talk about that, or just go listen to the Chris Walker podcast that Lisa recommended. I did a pretty deep analysis of our Super Bowl strategy there. But it's okay to say, 15% of our budget is crazy CMO experiments and brand stuff. We're not going to be able to measure this. And to the marketers out there, I will say this because I get asked a lot. A lot of marketers say, I believe in this stuff. I want to do this stuff. My CEO or co-founders, they just don't believe in marketing. They want to see the hard ROI on every investment. What can I do to change their mind? And I tell them, sadly, I wish I had a better answer. You probably can't. If your CEO does not admit that they don't understand marketing, and furthermore, they don't believe in marketing, go find a boss that does believe in marketing that will give you some leeway and wiggle room to do what you know is right. If your CEO, and many of them are engineers and they're fantastic, but they look at it only from that perspective of engineering, and if A plus B equals C, You can't do that with brand building. It's not a short-term impact or easy to measure thing. And I've found it impossible to change CEOs' minds about that. So you either go find a great CEO like the one I have, Amit, who believes in marketing, who knows the value of marketing and gives us that wiggle room, or just stay frustrated there. But those are basically the options. I
totally agree with you, Udi. And you're right, that is something Chris Walker talks a lot about. So again, since we have a broad audience here of founders, CEOs, as well as marketers, what would and you've talked about the Super Bowl ad, and you have mentioned in the past that it was 4 years in the making, which suggests that there was a foundation of brand already built by the time you invested in that tactic. So what would you say if anyone here is on the call walks away feeling like, well, we got to do a Super Bowl ad, right? And
please don't.
Yeah, please don't try this at home. But what would you say to companies in terms of how to think about matching your brand investments to your stage of maturity, so that they don't walk away from this call thinking, well, I guess I should go do a Super Bowl ad now? So yeah, so let me answer that, and then there's a couple more points I wanted to cover before we open it up more broadly for questions. I would say this first. Again, remember and start with this: the brand is who you are and what you are and what you're going to be. Marketing. Sorry, the fire truck here. There we go. You can't blame it on someone else who's not muted. No, that's all me. I'm on a main street here. Marketing is build the company that you want to be, right? Be the company that people describe as, oh, they're cool, oh, they're helpful, or whatever else you want to be. If you want to be, oh, they're serious and they're the go-to on web security, then that's what you build. But first build that and know that it's going to take time. It takes years, right? Nobody knew who Gong is in the first year. I think we started our third year with a mere 4,000 followers on LinkedIn. It took us about 3 years to build. And since then, we've gone on to almost 100,000 followers. Next month, we're going to hit 100,000 followers. It takes time to build that. And that's one measure of your brand, right? If people voluntarily follow you on social media or subscribe to your email list or sign up for your events, they like your brand. They think it's useful or entertaining or educating. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. So to be practical, if you're very early stage, I always tell folks, or forget what I say, here's what worked for me. In very early stages, we focused heavily on outbound, which means grab an SDR, give them a list and a script, and have them start calling, listen to their Gong calls, pick up the moments that are aha moments where the customer goes like, oh, that would be interesting. I would like to talk to your salesperson, and do more of that and tweak that. And when people slam the phone down, obviously you've got something wrong, so go change it. You've got to start very heavily with aggressive outbound, because you're not going to make it to the next round unless some of that works. All that great brand building stuff that eventually brings in inbound. At Gong, 40% of our revenue today comes from inbound. When I say inbound, it is the most narrow definition of inbound you can imagine. It's not someone downloading an ebook and getting a call. At Gong, we define inbound as someone coming voluntarily to our website, filling out a form or using the chat bot to ask for a demo. They want to be sold. Or they want to buy, is probably the better term. They want to buy right now. That is 40% of our revenue. In 2016, that was 0% of our revenue. Nobody knew who we were. Nobody came to our website. Nobody asked for a demo. So it took me 5 years to build up to 40% of our revenue coming in from inbound. So don't expect that to happen on day one, okay? A disclaimer here, or a qualifier, I'm talking about a classic enterprise sales motion. This is not a PLG motion. Those are different. Not my area of expertise, to be honest. But for enterprise sales, it will take a long time to get that inbound brand traffic. So you've got to start early, otherwise you'll never get there. But you've got to be realistic that the revenue in the first couple of years is not going to come from that brand stuff. It's going to come from good old outbound, getting on the phone and making those calls. Awesome. Audience members, does anyone want to chime in live with a question?
I have a question. Hi, Lisa. Good afternoon to
Hey,
both of you and Udi. Thanks so much.
Hi, welcome.
I'm doing double duty here, working at my wife's gift shop in a mall, but I got to talk to Udi because he really brings in a lot of insight. And so, and happy wife, happy life, right? Or happy partner, happy life, right? Oh, yeah. So what I want to ask you is very specific. So for founders, you went through this journey, like you said, of 5 years building an inbound and outbound engine to get to the point where you were able to have the trust of your C-level and you've already worked with your CEO for years before that. So there was already that trust. From a perspective of a consultancy like mine, it's an agency, we're a consultancy. To get that buy-in, one, you know, obviously, like you said, you got to identify CEOs that believe in the investment strategically of marketing. But if you're looking at companies that are like, say, in the SaaS space that are either startup or getting initial capital injections of VC, for them, what's a sweet spot on when they should commit to hiring an internal team and maybe also working with a partner, an outside partner? What's your experience been like that with both Gong and maybe even previous companies? Because I feel that a lot of SaaS founders are sort of on the fence. They know they need this, but they start going into their whole like spreadsheet and metric and ROI head and don't see that what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Are we putting money down on branding and hiring someone or outsourcing that to do the outbound, inbound, or are we going to kind of wait and see and make it all be about product led and people are going to come to us because our product is so wonderful and magnificent?
Right.
I'll mute myself for your answer.
So, you know, going back to the first quote I said today, there is no generic experience here. There are companies like Apple who reportedly did very little marketing for their first iPods and let them spread through the community, and companies like Dropbox and Slack that build amazing PLG motions without a ton of marketing in the beginning. Here's the criteria that I've used and we've used as a company when deciding what to invest in internally and when to seek external help from freelancers or contractors or agencies. If I deem something to be core to our being and having continuous use of that, I absolutely make an internal hire on day one. And I'll give a couple of examples. We've never had a piece of content written externally. All of the Gong Labs posts were written by a couple of folks on my team from absolutely day one. Okay, my first hire, Chris Orlov, he wrote the first 60 Gong Labs posts. And then he had a month of transitioning with Devin Reed, who's written the dozens that followed that with his team. We've never once outsourced that because that is core to our being. That is our core content strategy. And it took us so long to get it right that I highly doubt that anyone external would be able to give us that attention when they're supporting 5 other customers. Okay, at a company like Apple, design is in their core, so they do all of that internally. At Gong, design is not yet in our core. We just recently built our creative and brand team. Our director of creative and brand is here in the room with us. Haley, you can wave. But for many years, that was not core to the product or the company, so we used a lot of freelancers. People are surprised that Leo only joined us about 6 months ago and only more recently hired our first designer on the marketing team. The last 5 years, I never had a designer on the team. We had nice design, but we used an agency once to create the branding guidelines, and then we used agencies and freelancers to follow those guidelines. So I haven't seen an agency or a freelancer that, and the fact that I haven't seen doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I literally haven't seen a consultant that helped a marketing team or a company with a winning strategy or with a winning stream of content by doing that externally. I just haven't seen it. Like, would a founder consider getting an external product manager to come up with their product strategy? Probably not, right? Because that's core to what the company does. Then why do you expect to get a winning marketing strategy or execution if you outsource all of that? You can't. You need someone who eats, breathes, and sleeps your company, and that can only be an internal person if that's core. But separating what is core and what is not, that is key. If design is core, you've got to get it in-house. If it's not, like at Gong, you can keep it outside for a while.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think at times it's not binary, because I've been in Fortune 500, NASDAQ, publicly traded companies, 60 plus marketing team, and we had to outsource our AdWords to Google. So Google would drive, slide down. They would give us like their input, right? So I know what you're saying. The reason I have that question is because I think that there's a bit of the complexity behind that. What you just said is that sometimes, let's say software companies might have really to their core programming and development because that's what they're very good at. And then their marketing is weak, yet they'll assign one or two people to do it all, right? And so their expectation is sort of out of whack in that you're trying to support, 5 or 6 products that are being launched in very competitive markets, and you got a team of 2 that have no other choice but outsourcing it. What I find is that when you find the right, consultancy, whatever you want to call it, and they get to deep dive with you. In other words, they're really a partner. They maybe even came from the same space, but now they're spun off and done their own thing. There is that winning strategy where you get and you understand that they know your pain and they've actually spoken in your circles and in your industry.
I can see that working, Gianni. For the first,
but it's an exception to the rule. I agree with you.
Look, for the first 2.5 years or so at Gong, my team had 3 to 5 people. That was it. And what we were doing was doing some of the core work, like the content, hands-on. And for the rest of the stuff, we were setting the strategy. And then we had an agency doing PPC and an agency doing SEO and work with contractors for design and everything else. As recently as 2 years ago, when the pandemic started, I had a team of about 13. That was it. And so obviously we employed a lot of agencies and contractors, but I have to say that 95% of what they were doing was tactical. All the strategy and the directives came from the people inside the team who know exactly what's going on and what the brand needs. And then we can outsource a lot of the work, like managing ad campaigns. It's so the ad agency didn't decide what the content offers are going to be, but they did all the experiments and the execution of the creatives and the copy and the design and that sort of stuff. I hope that answers the question.
It did. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck at the stand. Lisa, I'll back to you.
Oh, so I want to get to some of the advanced questions. We got one from a Series A CEO who's asking about kind of the when, and we touched on this earlier, but his specific question was, some ideas to start building awareness for when the MVP is still being built and the company's in stealth.
Okay, so that's an interesting one. So my take on the question is sort of when do you start marketing and what can it look like at those early days? Did I get the gist of it?
Yeah, and this is a common question that I get across the portfolio. So I think this will be useful for folks that are going to be viewing the recording later.
Okay, maybe I'll start from sort of the end of my answer and then I'll work back from there and I'll explain. Because I get asked by marketers a lot, like, when is it too early to join a company? And my go-to advice on that is, if the company has not yet reached even initial product market fit, it is probably too early to do any sort of marketing at scale. To do marketing at scale, to build a demand gen machine, you have to have a clear story to articulate of why folks would want to consume your content, sign up for your events, download your product, do a free trial. If you don't have that narrative, which usually comes from early product market fit, what do you expect marketing to do? If you can't get 3 customers that actually stick with the product and retain them because they love it and provides value, then what story do you expect your marketing to tell the world? How will they build that machine? It's set up for failure. And I think sometimes it comes from unrealistic expectations from the COO that says, like, yeah, we're still working on the product, but go get me 1,000 leads who want to try it out. Well, how will I get you 1,000 leads who want to try it out if you haven't figured out the product? You don't have 3 customers that can talk about what value it's brought to them. And then the marketer is always going to fail, right? The marketer is always going to fail in that situation. So that is the end of my answer. The time to do marketing at scale and build an engine is once you have at least initial product market fit. And again, I can quote from an actual call when Amit Bendov called me in July of 2016. He said, look, we started this year with Norwest being one of our 2 seed founders. We told them that this year we might have 3 paying customers by the end of the year. And in February, we got 12 beta customers to try the product. And 3 months later, we wanted to see if we hit that early product market fit. And we told them that we're going to shut off the product unless they start paying 3 months into the beta. And 11 out of the 12 beta customers wrote a check and they said, don't shut this off. You can't shut this off for me. And so then Amit picked up the phone and said, hey, Udi, 11 of our 12 beta customers just signed on as paying customers. And this was in July. And remember, he said to the board, we'll have 3 paying customers maybe by the end of the year. He said, I think we can start marketing this outside the friends and family circle because it looks like we have this initial product market fit. Can you come help? And it was at that point that I came and built a content engine. And we already had that very rare early product fit on which to build on. So that is what I can say about founder expectations of marketing. Unless you've figured out even early product market fit, marketing cannot build an engine and machine about that. And maybe one more note, Lisa, on your question around stealth mode. You know, what I've seen sometimes work, but I suspect they already had a good working beta with product market fit, is creating some mystique and curiosity around a stealth product, of targeting the right buyers and getting people to sign up for a waiting list or a beta. We've seen this work with what was it, the OnePlus phone, and we've seen other companies that maybe have already a brand with a different product try this for an upcoming product, where they use the first product's brand to get interest and credibility for a soon-to-be launched product. We did something at a small scale like that at Gong. You know, we have a module that's in our product that's called deal management. And before it was ready to launch, this was a couple of years ago, I wanted to latch on to Dreamforce of 2018, I want to say. So in 2018, the product wasn't ready to launch, but I wanted to do some campaign and get interest. So what we did was we built a landing page for the waiting list. We told people that a new revolution of sales is coming, and this is where you sign up for the waiting list. And then I did a pretty big campaign on, I think it was 20 buses on Market Street. I put a simple one line on them, said something like, the best kept secret in sales is coming. Go to gong.io/beat. That was the working title or the code name of the product. And I got like 450 people to sign up for a beta of something they knew nothing about. I didn't say a word about the product. It was just some crazy ass video and that said nothing about the product. I didn't have a screenshot to show, nothing. And I got 400 and something people to call to sign up for the beta. And then 6 months later, when we were actually ready to roll it out, I got the SDRs to call down the list and give them a demo. So you can do that.
You're the best guerrilla marketer I know. So as I mentioned, we have a variety of levels here on our call, which is so awesome to see. So let's switch gears for a second to talk a bit more tactical. So we have, this is a question that came in advance from one of our companies, and they're asking about, well, if I'm trying to get my content stood up from a standstill, not only, you know, how do I think about getting it going, but keeping a cadence? And they actually gave you a compliment here, like, oh, you're so good about staying consistent with your content generation. How do you think about, like, from a resourcing perspective and even a leadership perspective, how do you start from, you know, ground zero and then keep it rolling, knowing that you have a million other priorities?
That's a great question. I'll say, I think I'll boil it down to 2 tips. Okay, one of them is strategy before tactics, and I'll dive into that. The second one is, do not underestimate the value of internal marketing, using every single employee in your company for amplifying your content, if not taking it to the next level and actually creating original content. And if we have the time and interest, I'm happy to dive into that as well. So let's dive into those 2 really quickly. When I say strategy before tactics, here's the thing about marketing teams, and it probably applies to other teams as well, but I've seen this most pronounced in marketing teams. We can always be busy. There is an endless amount of activities that we can do at any given time, so everyone is always frazzled and busy. That sometimes masks a lack of strategy. Okay, if you're doing 20 different activities and campaigns that don't all stem from one strategy and hoping that something sticks, you're probably wasting a lot of your time and resources. So strategy before tactics, and again, mirroring what we did here at Gong, we figured out pretty much on day 1 that our strategy is going to be to provide data-driven sales insights. And we're going to do that on wherever our audience of sales professionals are. And after a couple of months of experimenting, we found out that LinkedIn is the best place to do that. And we've just been consistent. And so our entire content strategy for the last 5 years has been providing data-driven sales insights to a LinkedIn audience. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all just posts, because LinkedIn audience also sign up for podcasts and also tune into LinkedIn Lives and also come to virtual events and also read articles, and they click on ads and they do a bunch of things. But having that clear strategy gives us that laser focus that you know this for product and you know this for any other department in the company. If they don't have laser focus, they'll just get scattered all over the place and they'll never make real progress on any meaningful trajectory. So same with marketing. There's got to be one simple strategy. If your head of marketing or your CEO doesn't know what the marketing strategy is, it's probably all over the place. So that's strategy before tactics, okay? And then everything else just stems from that. And I quickly learned in the first couple of months that I was fighting over a resource of a data analyst with my R&D team, and product kept winning, which is natural to, if the founders are very product led, as they usually are, they want R&D to have all the resources. And I kept pushing out content because I couldn't get that resource of data analysts, which I needed to create the type of content that I'm creating. So I just hired an external data analyst that works for marketing. And that's how I ensured that I have that consistency of resources. And people are surprised to hear, but for the first, I want to say 3.5 years ago, I had a single person write all the content. For the first almost 3 years, it was Chris Orlov. It was then replaced by Devin Reed. And they were a one-person team for all those years with the support of a data analyst doing some of the data mining and digging in the background. And then they crafted it to a beautiful story. But there was such a narrow, clear strategy that it was pretty easy to keep it consistent. So that's the power of strategy.
And did you leverage agencies as well as those resources?
No, none of our content writing is ever external because it is so crucial. Now, today the content team is 4 or 5 people, and they also leverage some external writers, but the writers are never given a blank page. The writers will receive at the very least like the bullet points of, this is the structure of the article, these are the 4 paragraphs, what they're going to be about, these are the charts we want to include, now go fill in the words and the blanks around that. So we give them the whole skeleton, and they just need to put some flesh over it. Because that's what I mean when our content is so core to our being. So we have a tone of voice guide that we give the contractors of, what type of humor is appropriate and what's not, and what not to do. And do you want to talk in the first and the second and the third person? You've got to figure these things out. Because if you work with 4 different freelancers and you don't give them much guidance, they're going to look like they came from many different people and they're not consistent. We so often hear from people, I'm getting all this amazing Gong content. It looks like one person wrote it. Well, it's not just one person anymore, but we are really tight about the style guide and the tone of voice, and one editor who edits every single piece of content for consistency. And then I wanted to add the second point on the power of internal marketing, because this is something that I think at Gong, we figured out really well. And I've seen it work well for a few other companies, but I think most companies just don't do it. And I'm not sure why. So from very early days, I worked in Israel where our team of engineers was. So I was the first marketer and around me was all engineers. But when we published an article, I made them all share it on LinkedIn, even though they had small networks of fellow geeks. I said, no, you're going to share this article because this is free publicity. Why would I just pay to get it promoted when I've got 12 people sitting in the room who can share it with their networks? Each of you on average have 300 to 500 people in your networks. If you're a go-to-market person, you probably have thousands of people in your network. Go and share that. And we got everyone into the habit of doing that, of sharing the content. Today, when we publish a Gong Labs post, it's pretty common to see 400 Gongsters share it on their social. Now, that is the definition of breaking the internet or completely taking over people's LinkedIn feeds. We hear that all the time. When we post a big piece of content, we get 400 people to share it. People write me and said, okay, you guys took over LinkedIn again. My entire feed is purple. All I see are Gong's posts, and you just can't avoid them. So the way to do that and get the buy-in of everyone, especially of the go-to-market team, because salespeople, they tend to be very focused on what they need to do. And they will do something in addition only if they see the direct value to them. So here's how we do it. When I do my onboarding classes for every month for the dozens of new Gongsters that join, I show them how the content engine works. And I show them, look, LinkedIn feed algorithm, when it sees that 100 or 200 people share the same piece of content in the first hour that it's published, it figures that this is an interesting piece of content for certain types of people, and it will make it more visible to more people like you. So if we get 100 salespeople to share marketing's piece of content, the LinkedIn algorithm will show that to 1,000 other salespeople. Guess what? Those are your prospects. And then they will click on the on the premium content offering, give us their email, and that becomes a lead that marketing returns back to you, Mrs. Salesperson,
So it's like a
as an
flywheel.
opportunity. You just need to explain it to them, and they're like, oh, wow. So all I need to do is spend 10 seconds sharing and liking that piece of content that you asked me to do once a week or less. And that comes back to me as opportunities because I just helped you amplify that content to my prospects that will come back as opportunity. That makes a lot of sense. And that's how we get 400 Gongsters to share a piece of content. I don't see a lot of companies doing that.
No, because I think they don't understand, they don't know how to provide that education. That example you just gave about teach them about the algorithm and how it works, and then connect it back to the outcome you're trying to drive. So I like that. I hadn't thought that, taken it that far. So another topic, folks, not only did I get advanced questions about this, but I see one of our leaders from Productive asking about category creation. So, I mean, we know like it's a winner take all proposition. And I mean, in my experience as an operating exec, I mean, I can't swing a cat without finding a CEO who wants to build a category on limited budget. And so what advice would you give to those people, and what are the considerations for when and how to embark on creating a category?
That's a great, huge topic. I'll try and give a few meaningful bullet points because there've been whole books and shows written about this. So here's my few tips. First, and I'm kind of serious about this, try and avoid building a category at all costs. Okay, it is a very expensive, laborious, and very long-term endeavor. If you can, avoid it at all costs. Now, it's not just me telling you to be lazy and avoid the work. I've seen the data that shows that I think it was only like, I want to say 8%, maybe I got the number wrong, but it's around that area. About 8% of IPO'd companies built their categories. The rest of them, the vast majority, articulated how their product is better in an existing mature category, and they became a successful public company. Okay, it can be done. In fact, most companies do it that way. It's become very fashionable in recent years that everyone wants to build a category. That's not the best way to become a successful company, and it's definitely not the only way to do that. So if you still think it's the only way to do that, think again. Look at the top 50 companies on NASDAQ. Very few of them built a category. Okay, there's some great stories like Qualtrics created the customer experience category. Other companies are creating their own category, but those are the exceptions. The vast majority are very successful without it. So it's not a must.
Yeah, so I guess an interjection there is, do you consider like the revenue intelligence as a category that you created?
Yes, we do. We were very deliberate and intentional about it. Happy to walk through the sort of main points of how and when we decided we need to build it and what we did to get it going. So this was in early 2019, so about two and a half years ago. We belonged to an existing category called conversation intelligence, and there were a few other players in it. And we were already playing in it for about 3 years when we felt that we had outgrown the category in two ways. One, we were trying to get hold of senior leaders in enterprises to talk to them about what our product can do for them. But as soon as they heard conversation intelligence, they bumped us down to someone in enablement or ops, because that's a tool for conversation. What? No, go talk to Michelle. She does that. And that's a problem we wanted to solve. We wanted to get and retain the attention of the senior leader, which I'm sure is a problem many of you share. The second problem was that all the other players in our category seemed to have a much narrower view of what that category conversation intelligence was about. They were recording calls and playing them back to help improve salespeople skills. That was the extent of it. And our nearest competitor was recently acquired for 8% of our last valuation. That is a testament to how narrow their vision was and what kind of success that led to. It's not the only reason, but it's one of them. And so those are the two reasons we decided that the way to solve those problems one of the ways could be launching a new category that would be interesting to the senior sales leader and would help us position ourselves differently from everyone else in conversation intelligence, because it's much harder to explain when you're in the same pool with them than when you're in the grown-ups pool and they're all playing the kiddies pool. So to cut a long story short, we hired a dedicated executive. We hired Sheena Badani on my team. Funny story, she was interviewing for another role, and we really liked her, the whole interview panel, but she lacked some specific experience for that role she was interviewing for. And so we offered her to create this new role and said, do you want to lead our category creation efforts? And we shared the story that I just shared with you, and she got excited about it, and we're really glad she did. And she joined us, and in her first 6 months, she led us through a series of workshops where we looked at the different possibilities of where to take the category and how to name the category to answer those specific questions. What would a senior revenue leader not be able to delegate down? What would that senior leader say, oh, this is something I care about, I need to take this call? And we came up with revenue intelligence, because the revenue leader deals with revenue, not with conversations. It sounds trivial now, took us a couple of months of work to get there, okay? And while everyone else was talking about conversation intelligence, we were talking about revenue intelligence. Seems like a very subtle change, hugely meaningful in our ability to get hold of senior leaders, and hugely meaningful in allowing us to differentiate ourselves away from all the conversation intelligence. We now have slides showing that conversation intelligence is actually a very small part of what our total revenue intelligence vision is. And it just made it so much easier. And for those last almost 2 years now, we've been pumping a lot of fuel into creating this category. One of my team's 4 big goals for the year is putting the category first. And that means we created the event, the Revenue Intelligence Summit, that happens 4 times a year. It's not the Gong Users Conference. It's the Revenue Intelligence Summit. We own that. We're promoting the category. We created Reveal, the Revenue Intelligence Podcast. It's not the Gong podcast. It doesn't have the word Gong in it. That takes some maturity to put the ego aside, say this is not about the company name or logo. This is about the category. It's the Revenue Intelligence Podcast. And we're doing that. We're working on the State of Revenue Intelligence report, and we're considering writing a book. And we're doing all these things to promote the category, because if we do that, it's way easier to get an audience to agree on a common problem than it is to get them to agree that your solution is best for that problem. So once we are the source of information that helps our audience agree on the problem that they've been relying on opinions, on biased opinions and partial facts for way too long. Oh, we need a solution for that. What's the best solution for that? Oh, that's revenue intelligence. Who's the leader with 80% market share in revenue intelligence? Oh, that happens to be Gong. And then they go through that self-discovery that we help push from the problem side through the category to the final vendor. So that is a very simplified version of the category play.
I love it. Arun, did you have any follow-on questions for Udi on this question?
Nothing specific. Thank you so much for that. I mean, we're kind of working through some of those challenges ourselves. One question might be just how did you get traction? So I know you talked about a lot of this, but initial traction and traction with analysts, how did you have that conversation? What was that experience like?
Initial traction with analysts, I'm almost ashamed to admit how relatively simple it was. So we had a very industrious Gartner sales lady in Israel when I was stationed there. And she was trying to sell us a Gartner subscription. She had worked with me and Amit in previous companies. And we told her, look, no false expectations. It'll probably be a couple of years before we sign on as customers. But here's what you can do to help us. And we said, okay, we know that this was, I think, in November of 2016. And we said, we want to know, when is Gartner publishing the next cool vendor list for our category? We want you to identify the names of the analysts we need to talk to, and we want your help in scheduling meetings with them. And she went out of her way to find out, oh yes, they actually need to submit their recommendations by December, and the cool vendor is going to be published in February. Don't mark the dates. These are just for that specific category in that specific year. And these are the 6 analysts you absolutely need to talk to in the next 3 weeks before they submit their recommendations. So we're like, okay, Nancy, can you help us get meetings with all of them? And she did. And we briefed half a dozen analysts in like 3 weeks. And we got Cool Vendor, tiny anonymous company, in February 2017. We got that first Gartner recognition as a cool vendor in a new space. And we followed a similar process and were recognized then by a hot vendor by Aragon Research. So I don't know if we're cool or hot or lukewarm, depending on the analyst. And then the same Sheena Badani I just told you about, she's been handling our analyst relations for the last couple of years, and we've become a lot more deliberate about it. And we've been giving them a lot more love. So now we're reaching out and giving them inquiring and taking briefings, and also establishing some paid relationships. But honestly, I hope there's like no one from Gartner or Forrester here, but I would not recommend spending those big bucks in the first couple of years. It took me 3 years to pull out my wallet to pay Gartner for the first time. You can do so much with them for free by briefing them and just looking at the fine print, because they are supposed to be objectively covering everyone in every space that they cover, regardless of who has a paid relationship with them, because that's the service that they give their other type of clients, you know, the IT departments and the buyers. So you can do a lot with them without ever paying them a dime. It took me 3 years to start paying them.
I have one follow-up question on this topic as well. How did you evangelize this new category internally?
That's a great one. So, you know, that goes back to what we talked about brand. It's kind of the same thing. Do not leave it to marketing. Building a category is not a marketing thing. It has to come down from the co-founders. The CEO needs to talk about it in every all hands meeting, and every executive needs to have a plan for how to instill this category into their team. So, you know, we create the sales decks, they talk about the category. So every salesperson is repeating this 10 times a day. The SDRs, they pitch this on the phone. The customer success managers, they talk to their customers every day about the category. And every person in the company understands the category story and how we're different from the old category and why this is important. It cannot be left to marketing. If marketing is in charge of either the brand or the category, it's never going to work. It has to start from the co-founders, and everything we do, whether, you know, we're now sort of reviving our mission and vision statement, it starts from the top, and then every executive has a plan to instill this in their team. We did the same with our operating principles to make them stick. We have 8 operating principles. Every employee can recite them, and that's only because we use them every hour of every day, and that starts from the top. So that's the short answer on making the category stick internally.
Thanks.
So Udi, I'm going to ask a question that I know everybody's thinking, but maybe is too afraid to ask. You know, obviously you have a lot of great talent, a lot of great experiences as a brand builder, sort of a god in B2B marketing. Well, one thing I know for sure, just based on my own experience, is that, you know, you don't achieve that status overnight. And obviously you've done a lot of the work to get where you are. Would you share with us some of the mistakes you made along the way, some of your failures that, you know, have led to where you are now?
Yeah, good one. Wow. Okay, I would prepare a list. I mean, obviously, and anyone who's seen any sort of success can attest to this, that for everything we've done right, we've probably done 10 things wrong overall to get there. And we have a mentality of experimentation and trial and error and failing quickly and embracing and celebrating and learning from those failures. That is the only way I know how to get to success, right? Now at Gong, we've been fortunate to have a very seasoned, I hate that word, it always sounds like a steak, but a seasoned team of industry veterans that have made a ton of mistakes in previous companies. I've made millions of them, and we just avoided repeating some of them at Gong. So we haven't made any huge strategic mistakes at Gong, but I'll give a couple of examples. You know, I found myself occasionally being swamped with activities and losing the forest for the tree. And I think that's a classical mistake that marketers make when you're like stretching 20 different directions and, oh, but I need to get back to her and she needs to talk to me and I need to get that event and I need to organize that happy hour. And then you need someone to slap you and say, wait, stop. What are you actually working on? What is your goal for this week or this quarter? What is the strategy? And if you don't immediately know what that is, you need to stop, take a step back, just stop everything you're doing and just refocus and say, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve this quarter. There's actually only 3 out of those 20 things I was working on that are going to advance that goal. And that's how I organize my calendar, and that's how I help my team prioritize their work. The company has 3 goals for the year. We derive 4 goals for marketing out of those company goals. And every person in marketing knows what those 4 goals for the year are. And every activity that we do in every day should roll up into one of those 4 goals. If it doesn't, you should ask, should I really be working on this right now? And that's a mistake that I occasionally make, other people occasionally make, you know, we get asks for our time and resources all the time. And you've just got to ask yourself, yeah, if I have the time to be nice to everyone, you can do that for a little while, but it doesn't scale. And at some point, if this doesn't advance one of my 4 goals, I'm going to respectfully decline, not even apologize, because I have to be ruthless about how I use my calendar. That's one mistake. I'll give you another one that's like way more tactical, because I think that one was a little bit up in the air. We've been very successful with getting customer reviews. Any customer review website you go to, from G2 to Capterra to Gartner Peer Insights to Trustpilot, TrustRate, all of them, Gong has thousands of reviews, and we have more reviews than any other vendor and the highest satisfaction score than any other vendor on all the review sites. And we're top right on all the grids. And it doesn't come by chance. We found clever ways of incentivizing customers and pushing the right customers, and a lot of them also go organically to give us the reviews we need. And we made a big mistake last year during June. It was an insensitive mistake. It was right after the George Floyd murder. And we were running a reviews campaign, and we thought it might be a good idea to change some of the usual incentives that we gave people, like a Amazon gift card, and instead offered to donate in their names to a Black Lives Matter movement. And that was not received well. That was not received well. People rightfully told us, if you care about that cause, you should donate money to that cause and not ask me to write a review or do something for you before you do that. And it should have been obvious to us. It was not, and that was my mistake. I approved that campaign, and within an hour of sending out, I don't know, 6,000 emails asking for the reviews, we got about six responses that were very negative and said that that's not the usual Gong I know. Like, this is offensive, and you should not have done this. Within an hour, we sent out an apology email to the same list. Most of them had not even opened up the original email. And within an hour, we also donated a few $1,000s to the movement that we were trying to raise money for, and uncoupled it from the review campaign. So that was a lesson that in times of hypersensitivity, remember, we're in the middle of a world pandemic and the Black Lives movement and everything going on, you've got to be super sensitive to these things and put the people and what they're going through first before what your company needs right now.
Awesome. Any last questions from our audience, as I know we're coming up on time here? Feeling all set? Good. Well, thank you so much, Udi. This has been such a pleasure. So great to get to know you through this process and to hear your insights and have you share them. I'm going to be following this, wrapping it all up in a blog for folks to review. And thanks to our audience for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. If you want to connect